Okay, guys, we
Yeah.
are back with Doug Chadwick. And you guys know me. I am not the technology person. And of course, Ed is at the gym. So we appreciate everybody hanging in there with us, and we'll continue our conversation. So I think we were talking about grizzlies and how much we share DNA with them. Can you continue on about that and maybe share a story or two that you've had with grizzlies?
Sure. Um, well, as I was saying before, a grizzly ate my internet connection, um, or some. Um, I've spent a lot of time watching them, and I do it for a couple of reasons. One is I feel more alive in more ways than I can almost any other way, um, because there is fear involved, but it's also an animal that's so much like me. It's easy to relate to. I can glimpse how the Native Americans talked about the bear people. They live a long time. They're very curious. They're dominant in their environment. They're learning their whole lifetime. They communicate a lot, and they their care between the mother and cubs is easy to relate to. The way um, they use their environment. It goes on and on. So there's that, and then there is the fact that I do share. The book I wrote is called Four Fifths a Grizzly, which sounds like, well, where is this guy coming from? He thinks he's big and tough, or what's he getting at? And the thing is, I have identical genes with a grizzly up to about 80% of the total that we both have. And it's the same for all other animals. And in many cases, it's more. It probably is with grizzlies. No one's ever actually compared them exactly, but you and your household dog share about 85% of your genes. You and a cow out in the field somewhere in Montana next to me, it's about 85%. And I just gravitated to the grizzly because I know them maybe better than I do a lot of other mammals. And also because saying I'm four-fifths duck-billed platypus is probably not going to draw in too many readers. But I can be four-fifths a snow leopard. I can be four-fifths a hopelessly cute red panda, or four-fifths a bat.
Wow.
And a lot of people know or sense that we have a lot of similarities, but the fact that the genetic relationship is that high, and of course it's up to 98 to 99% with chimpanzees, and 90% plus with other primates. Again, people may have heard that and think about it, but they're not as aware that we share about 50 to 60% of our genes with fish, and 30 to 40% with insects, which look totally alien to us, but we're all running on the same processes.
Well, that kind of brings me to, I know that you were, I mentioned that conservation conversations, and you mentioned you were likening us to lichen. So how is that possible? I mean, I think people can kind of grasp the grizzly and certainly the chimpanzee, but lichen?
Yeah. Well, how about this one? I'm 24% a wine grape, or a wine grape was 24% a human. I don't know. You look at it either way.
Some of us are more than that.
I was going to say I've been in some situations where, yeah, the percentage was changing, but 18% of baker's yeast and 7% of bacteria. We, again, all have certain molecular processes, building blocks. And it's why people can draw from, look, who knew that elephants, big as they are, with so many more cells and more things that can go wrong in cells that cause disease, elephants never, or I shouldn't ever say never, but very, very rarely get cancer. What do we have to learn from that? Who knew that a obscure Israeli scorpion has a molecule that it's a venom, but it's used in medicine to help get drugs through the blood-brain barrier to get at diseases inside the actual brain tissue? Who knew the wings, the scales of iridescent butterflies? They're structural colors, they're not pigments. Who knew those would be of use in optical filters? Anyway, we can draw from all of nature, from the 1.2 million plus species already identified, and there are probably as many as 10 million out there, because we share these building blocks, and we're just on the verge of being able to, through genetic engineering and molecular biology and understanding genes in whole new ways, we're on the verge of being able to draw from all of nature and read from it. And I don't want to get dramatic and go all eco, sky is falling, but we're burning the libraries in a lot of the world.
Well, I think that's a little bit of the point, is that, you're talking about how we're like them and connected in that way. But the bigger point, I think, is how everything's interconnected and it's a system. And so if something drops off in the system, even if it's really distant from us, that it does have a trickle down or up effect. And I think I heard the quote about don't kill that wildflower because it may cure cancer. And I think those were some of the things that you were just, talking about.
Yeah, and that's, look, we environmentalists, and I'm definitely one. We try everything: guilt, blame, shame. Sky is falling. We're all going to die if we lose this species of that. And that we've been doing that since the 60s and since Earth Day. But if we say, yes, there have been rare wildflowers that have turned out to have a cure for cancer, that's very real. But it's the potential that lies out there. And I guess another way to sum it up is it's way too early for us to say we know enough. Let's just keep on this pace we're going with development and human population and transforming the seas, the skies, the temperatures, the shape of the landscapes, and we'll get by. We'll figure something out. And every generation thinks they know a lot more than they really do, and about a generation or two later, everybody's looking back and say, how could they have believed this ridiculous stuff? And so do we know enough to be transforming the natural world at the pace we are? And I don't want to say this is going to be the cure, this is going to be the big change in structural materials, this will be the next source of energy, but people are looking into all of that. They're looking into ant colonies, social insects, to figure out how to design the most efficient transportation systems and waste disposal methods for urban areas. Go ahead.
And I think, the point is that you talk about, when you hit people over the head with a hammer or try to scare them or whatever, it works for a little while, it works for some people, but really educating people. And because people have access now to the internet and so many other things that they can do their own investigation. They don't even have to take your word for it or anybody else's word for it. They can go ahead and do the research about how a certain wildflower, helps with cancer, or the ants are helping transportation, or, it's really about educating people so that they can feel and take ownership, and they don't, people don't like to be told what to do anymore. So
they don't.
Go ahead.
No, I hear it. Societies have set up through time quite a barrier between us and all the rest of nature. And the scientific facts don't support any of that, but it's something we prefer to believe. We do think we're separate and superior and entitled, and look, I can't argue that this wasn't very successful. There are 8 billion of us on this planet, but what was successful and really worked in terms of grabbing resources and competing with other critters for 8 million of us, or 80 million of us, or 800 million of us, doesn't necessarily work for 8 billion of us.
Right.
And that's all. We, if only for our own self-interest, what we stand to lose, and to aid our own survival and our own future technologies and development, we just don't know enough. And the other thing we haven't talked about, Kim, is we are also more than human. There's our greater selves, not just all these genetic links, but the fact that, I started off as a microbe, and you did too, as a fertilized egg. It was smaller than a lot of little bacteria. And now I have 30 trillion human cells. Very proud of them. We've done good. But I have more than that number of microbes inside my body, digesting things for me. A lot of people are getting savvy about probiotics and the gut-brain relation. They've heard that our microbes are producing hormones that affect our moods and our thoughts and our actions. We are all of those things. They're protecting our health. And I also, in each single cell of those 30 trillion in my body, and every plant and animal and protozoan has the same thing, I have mitochondria, which are these little organelles inside the cell that actually divide independently and have their own genes separate from ours, and they're highly modified bacteria from ancient times, and they are producing the energy that allows us to stay alive. So we are more than just human as we imagine it. And we are certainly anything but separate from nature. And
when we're talking about nature, and you're making a good case as to why people should conserve and protect and advance those things. I know we have certain parks, we have certain wildlife refuges. Yeah. Do you think we have enough of those for what we need?
Oh no. Oh no. And not just because I'm a hardcore greenie. The way nature works is through these connections. And it's interesting, you mentioned lichens, and a lichen is not a organism, it's a community. It's a couple of different kinds of fungus. It's algae, it's cyanobacteria, which can also photosynthesize, and so are we, and so is everything else. Well, that connectivity also is how genes flow between 12,000 years ago, there were only 1 million people on the face of the planet. We've been around, Homo sapiens been around for 350,000 years. There's only 12,000 years ago, we hit 1 million. Now we're transforming all this. We create little refuges or samples of nature here, sometimes bigger ones, but not that big. And we say we save nature. Look, you can walk in there and see all this wild stuff and see how animals interact. Over time, that won't hold up because of inbreeding, because it's genetically isolated. You have to keep genetically flexible and be able to exchange genes with other populations to survive over time. Also, if you're in a little refuge that's separated by increasing amounts of development from the next refuge, so that there's almost no hope of connection there, unless you're building corridors or wildways, then whatever happens to that refuge is a disease, it's a insect outbreak, it's a typhoon, a hurricane, or whatever, and that's it. They have no place to go, which is why most extinctions in the past 500 years have been on oceanic islands. Because whoever's there got to They got to take whatever comes. I think down in Florida,
Yeah.
you can relate to that a little better than a lot of people.
So
But
we need more parks and more connections of
yeah,
those parks so that the
yeah,
animals can breed and
yeah.
move and exchange.
Exchange and adapt to
Mm-hmm.
changing conditions. That's what drives survival over time. And if you can't adapt, if you can't move, if you can't exchange genes, you haven't saved nature, not for the long run. We've done a darn good job. That's a century or two old idea of how to protect nature. And that was when there were only about a quarter as many people on the planet.
Right.
And now there are people in between, growing numbers of people in between all these refuges. We need to build those corridors. They don't have to be super parks. They don't have to be big. They don't have to compete with people. Just find the last of the wild places, make a habitat bridge, a wildway movement corridor, and that will hold up over time. And I see that around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very positive thing. I refuse to be a doom and gloom person because I see enough good things happening. I just don't think the public as a whole is as aware of
Mm-hmm.
how important that is. And that's what we need to do to finish
So
the job.
And again, gets back to, to education. And can you talk a little bit, you were talking about the connectivity, and can you talk a little bit about this Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative?
Yeah, I'd love to do it because I live in the heart of the
Take
Rockies.
it away.
Yeah, it's 2,000 miles along this continental divide from south of Yellowstone up to the northern Yukon territory. And the idea was, well, this is where Jasper and Banff and Glacier Park and Yellowstone and these big, wonderful, crowns of the continent, the jewels of national parks. And you could say the same thing about a lot of the parks in East Africa. It's a string of pearls. And the idea is, how do we connect them? And then they will hold up over time. And I know this can sound like a big pie in the sky plan, but there is a Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, and it involves creating some new reserves, but mostly connecting them, managing the land in between a little bit differently in some areas to allow animals the ability to move and adapt. And they've gone from less than 5% connectivity between these reserves to more than 30% in 2 decades. So I love pointing this out because it's a can-do project. We got a lot of public lands. A lot of people are behind it. And one of the main sources of, people say, oh, it's the ecology or the economy, is this jobs or the environment? But up there, the main sources of revenue in large parts of both Canada and Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, are tourism and recreation. This stuff's getting scarce, and more people are coming seeking it out and willing to pay for it. So that old thing's gone, that old polarization.
And
Sorry.
we know in Florida that, our economy is tourism, and without water, we have our issues with water, without good water, we're going to be in big trouble. So I think there's a lot of parallels. It's just a different kind of thing we're protecting, but there are parallels with the point of tourism is the economy. It's
sure
about interconnected, so that is a good point.
Well, and it's not either or. That's the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
People have set it up so that which side are you on? It's like, be on both sides. And I know Florida had that, was it 2000 program to create actual corridors between you have a wonderful spectrum of refuges and parks and preserves.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was how can a black bear get from the Keys up to northern Florida? Do we have enough routes and wildlands in between? And the design of that is terrific. The practicality of carrying it out can get controversial, but you're ahead of a lot of other states. And I see it in like there are three African nations, Mozambique, South Africa, and Botswana, Zimbabwe actually four, that are trying to work together to make national pathways and connections between, for animals the size of elephants, got to move over a big landscape to survive. And lions and all the things that people go to see. They don't go there to watch, butterflies and birds. They want to see that big, majestic dawn of creation kind of feeling you have looking out over an African savanna. And there's no sense losing that if we can, again, not transform whole landscapes, leave plenty of room for people in development, but build the connections that'll keep that flowing. And the more we can see that this is not an option, it's not a personal opinion, it's not a philosophy, it's what works in nature. It's how it has to work and has always worked over time. Then we can get more realistic about the necessity of making these connections and not turn it into a matter of opinion.
Right.
And again, yeah,
we're connected. Point.
Oh, exactly, and we're connected to nature. Just I guess
I see you light up, when you were talking about being out in nature and being with the grizzlies, and I completely get that point, because for me, there's nothing better than going on a trail or hiking in Utah or taking the kayak out or just out walking, in the back.
Yeah.
And so. And I think getting people back connected with what that can afford you in terms of your own individual physical and mental health, to just disconnect and go out and just look at what's around you. So,
if you do that in South Korea or Japan with a guide who takes you on a nature walk, they call it forest bathing. You immerse your senses in the outdoors. Your health insurer will cover the costs of that forest bathing sessions. But if you just go for a Kim walk somewhere, I go for a Doug walk somewhere, and we've got a pal along with a whole medical kit, and they are taking measurements of us. Your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops, your immune system gets boosted, the activity of the immune cells, and your cognitive abilities get much more clear. Yeah. Compared especially to a stressful, anxious, urban, you're driving in traffic or working at a job you don't like. But, and again, it isn't one good, the other bad, but the balance between them is really important. And nature is a big part of that. And more doctors are recommending time in nature for people just to stay healthy. I recently saw in Canada, the government provided a prescription that doctors can give away, and it's a free pass to all the national parks of Canada. So, this idea is coming. And
I like that idea.
Yeah, a little time in nature is good, more is healthier. And there's a link between time spent outdoors or in nature, and it can just be in your yard or garden. Doesn't have to be out in some wild place, and longevity. And of course, that's also a function of the state of your health to some degree. But what's not to love and what's to argue about? So
no, and I think a lot of people got out, when the pandemic started and everything was locked down, and a lot of people got out and connected a little bit more. Maybe they've forgotten now, but I know one thing that really struck me is during the pandemic time, during that month or so that we were locked down, right after that, we were lucky enough to be invited out by some friends on their boat, and we went out into the Gulf. And after having that break for so long, and it wasn't even that long. I mean, the waters were amazing. And so it was even such but you could really see how sometimes, if too many people are out in nature in a specific spot, it's going to need a little bit of a rest.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to get in one. This is my one enviro pitch, though, because I live right next to Glacier Park, and I'm spoiled because I've been there a long time, and that is the crown of the continent, and it's got every plant and native animal that has been there still there. So I can be watching mountain goats, look a little farther down, bighorn sheep, grizzlies, wolverines, lynx. Anyway, and now we've gone from 1 million people a year a couple of decades ago to more than 3 million a year coming to the park, and it's not the same experience. And they're trying to micromanage, the use. And I understand that's something we can do maybe better than we have. But what I don't hear is when people are discussing all these details of micromanagement is, why aren't we making more parks?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We've got Yellowstone's overcrowded, Great Smoky's overcrowded. All the parks have taken a big rise and it's important to people, and they own them and they deserve that. But if they're all shoulder to shoulder, why isn't making more parks on the table, or call them something else? Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you. I could not agree with you more. I tried to get into Glacier this last summer, and it's a very different process now. You have to get a reservation on the Going to the Sun Road, and that really, you have to get in a lottery, and it was like, whoa. So, I mean, I understand the need for that. I can appreciate that, but it's not as accessible, as it was. So, yeah.
Well, I'm coming down your way to a lot of wonderful wildlife refuges. Doesn't have to be a park.
Nope.
And I know there's a lot of volunteer work that helps keep these places going. And even in overcrowded Glacier Park, there's a lot of citizen science going on, and people are recording populations of, say, the little pika, which is actually a member of the rabbit family, but it's only about this big, and it has not long ears, but little cute one. It's the one that is out all winter, and it brings vegetation out from this underground burrow and dries it in the sun on a nice day. And anyway, they are kind of a global warming indicator. When the average temperature gets above a certain number, these guys just fall off the map. They cannot live. So they've got people out monitoring those closely, monitoring mountain goats, helping with stream surveys, all that. And it's wonderful because it's great to see people. I own the park. What's my responsibility? What do I give back? And we can do the same with refuges and national seashore, all that. And so I don't know. I'm a willful optimist. I think we can, if we see things differently, get rid of some of our old assumptions about us being kind of liberated from nature and separate from it, and we can kind of take it or leave it. It's a nice hobby. It's for certain people. No, It's not. It's not optional unless you don't have any gut bacteria and you don't have any mitochondria, and nothing happens to you when you go out into a natural setting. But that's not going to happen. So, anyway, go ahead. I'm babbling. No, I'm just saying. I tried to tie these many ways of coming at the commonality and the partnerships we have with nature that make us what we are. And because I think we're at that stage where we've got to start getting things done and getting them done right pretty quickly. And everyone's heard statistics. I mean, we may lose up to, quarter, half the species on the planet before the century's out. And we know what's going on with changing conditions in the seas and the air and everything else. So why we're still debating this, I guess we all know the reasons, for inertia, and there are a lot of vested interests there, but everybody's best interest is to do as much as they can to keep the natural values that we're lucky enough to have inherited. And it isn't just because it's a nice thing to do or a good thing to do, or you're a diehard nature lover. Right. So that's what I was trying to get at.
that was perfectly summed up. I don't want to take up all of your time. Is there anything else you want to get out to people? I know you're going to be doing the lecture here
Yeah.
on Sanibel on the 4th. Go ahead, reiterate the book and where people can get it, and then we'll let you go, even though
Okay.
I could keep you on here all day. And when I come out there to Glacier, if you live next door, don't be surprised if you see me knocking on your door out there.
Oh, won't. I mean, any excuse I have to take somebody out and share that area, I just leap on. So please do.
Be careful what you say.
No. I'm the same way. People, they make a nice comment. Oh, well, if you're in the area, stop by and say, okay, get ready. So please do. And let me read. Can I read one little paragraph?
Absolutely.
And this gets back to the genetics and being 4/5 a grizzly. I am, in a sense, alive in a mind-boggling number of creatures in a staggering range of environments around the globe through the genes we share. Sorry, I got lighting problems. Getting late. I leap, I fly, I slither, I shimmer with iridescent scales in the waters off Zanzibar, and I stretch my petals towards the light in far northern Siberia. Being more closely related to avocados, ants, and aardvarks than most people suspect doesn't dilute our stature as humans, but instead increases it manyfold. It renders us more than human. This is our deep heritage, an old, enduring kinship as big as the living world. And that's how I see it in the most positive way possible. You can still demean somebody by calling them an animal. You can still talk about beasts and brutes and talk about the nobility of the human creature, which is getting to be more in doubt lately. But anyway, it's just, this isn't us versus nature. We come from a continent where we prided ourselves on conquering nature. Right. And we come from a Western culture. We prided ourselves on subduing our nature, our brute nature, and becoming, the angelic humans, and fine and dandy, but it's just everybody who's ever peered through a microscope or looked at the molecules that make us up says, nah, you're off on a nice story about ourselves. So let's get real and let's save the planet. And I'll talk more about it when I get down your way.
Well, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for, doing part 2. And we look forward to having you down in our neck of the woods.
All right. And I look forward to seeing you up on the trails in Glacier. Okay.
All right. Deal? I'll see you there. All
Thanks,
right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you. If you stuck with us, I really appreciate it. That was Doug Chadwick. Amazing. I bet he has a million stories, but we're glad to get in what we could. And again, he's going to be down in this area March 4th over in Sanibel. And thanks for listening. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.